So this is
Whatever.
the interview with Shawn Matson. He's been my mentor and my glass teacher during my time at Priory and during this senior project. Um, so, how were you first introduced to glass?
The main uh, introduction I had with any impact, I guess, was when I was in my undergrad schooling and I was doing a graphic design illustration major. And the school that I was going to just happened to be one of the few with a glass blowing program. And that didn't necessarily catch my interest until I needed to take a break from sitting in a computer lab, 24/7, sleeping there and never seeing the sun and so on. And being a very active person, I just got a little claustrophobic. And so there's nothing more active or physical really in the art world than glass blowing. It's hot, there's a lot of movement, there's teamwork, and it's very dynamic. So I thought, I'll go down there and hang out for a semester. So I took an apprenticeship with the head of the glass program, which basically meant I was interning and doing errands and setting up shows for him and doing a lot of work for him and never really getting involved in the material too much, but it was enough to to hook me.
So would you recommend an apprenticeship? Like, is that a way to go, or do you think there are better ways?
For most disciplines, some kind of internship, mentoring, relationship is really useful. You have to go through your paces, and it can be humbling. It can also be very empowering. It teaches you a lot of the inner workings of things, and probably the most influential part really is that you're just around the thing all the time. So with glass and some other mediums that are very process oriented, just sitting and watching for hours and hours on end got me learning how to do it without actually doing it. And the familiarity got me comfortable, it got me interested, and developed relationships with students, instructors, other artists, and the equipment. So yeah, for me and for most people, that kind of relationship is really, really valuable. It's hard to start off fresh on your own and go someplace without anybody leading.
Yeah, sure. Cool. So you kind of explained this, but so why did you stick with glass and make that your profession instead of going back? Like you said, you took a break to go to glass, right? But why did you choose to stay with it?
Well, to be totally honest, I don't completely know. The decision at the time was simply that my acumen for it was really good. My success in it was initially very good. I enjoyed the physicality of it. The medium itself lended itself really well to my own interest in craft and process and determined practice. So all of that just seemed a better fit for me than sitting at a computer.
Yeah.
My considerations at that time were very altruistic, and I wasn't necessarily thinking about long-term professional goals or the myriad of other considerations that you might have in it.
Yeah.
So for me at the time, that's where it was. It seemed like the universe and situations were in agreement, because within a semester of declaring my major, I got an internship at the Corning Museum of Glass, which, out of their many, many applicants for that every year, they only accept, well, at that time, 4.
4? Wow.
So
That's pretty good.
yeah, so I was just like, well, this seems good, and and then from that I was offered a job straight out of college directly because of that experience.
Yeah.
So it was just everything just kind of flowed from there, and life takes its twists and turns along, as you go along. But initially, it just seemed to work really nicely, so I kept going.
And when you were like sitting at the computer, what were you doing? Like what kind of?
I was, as a graphic design student.
Okay, graphic design.
I was doing what they do. So it was a lot of photography, a lot of typography. At that time, Photoshop and all the other Adobe products had just come out. So I was in between the hands-on, paste up, and analog kind of methods, illustration, with paint and pencils. Photoshop came along and we started getting into that. Goals being the same, process being a little different. But it was a lot of like promotion materials and posters and logos, book design, all that kind of thing.
Did the design thinking that you needed for that and that you kind of worked on, do you see that kind of transfer into your work now?
Yeah, so aesthetically, I have a very strong interest in shape and line, and that was always true in my graphic design and illustration work. It's just something that I'm very in tune with, and it pops up all the time. In terms of process, I work in similar ways and being very kind of sequential, step by step, and doing a lot of practice. So in photography, it's working on a subject matter continually for a long period of time, working on shape relationships and things like that, and communication. My work in class is a bit more craft oriented than that, but the way I approach them is pretty similar.
Can you talk about like what aspects of, or like what kind of pieces spoke to you the most? Like what are the types of glass that you enjoy working with most? Like I know you're not primarily a glass blower, but like what spoke to you the most?
Well, for example, at Corning, when I was working daily with Lino Tagliapietra and a lot of other artists similar, his work in particular grabbed me and the rest of the world because of the volume of the work, not meaning, well, in terms of volume, he's incredibly productive, but what I mean is like the space that his objects take up is really profound while being very elegant and simple at the same time. And line is a very, very heavy component of all of his work. He knows how to use glass as a way to create marks on a surface, or within a surface, really, as would be true for glass. So, his aesthetic just is very much in tune with mine, or the other way around. So that's where my work initially kind of went. I was also very interested in William Morris, who does a lot of artifact and mythological sculptural forms, totem poles and skulls and that kind of stuff too. If you think back to like ancient artifacts from Mayan cultures or Native American Indians, that kind of stuff. So my mind kind of went in two directions that way. But primarily in the glass shop, working with symmetrical forms, blown forms with line and shape. It's kind of where I've been, in particular in the Venetian tradition.
So, I mean, it's pretty awesome that you worked at Corning. Like, that's a pretty prestigious place to be. Are there any particular memories or experiences you had there that were just really profound?
Quite a lot.
Yeah.
There was an artist, Will Stokes, out of Bellingham, Washington, flame worker. He was the first guy that I really kind of latched onto in flame working, and his thing was insects, like really, really intricate, realistic dragonflies and spiders and that kind of stuff. Emilio Santini, later this summer, another flame worker, introduced me to the Venetian applications from the furnace in flame working, and everything that I saw day in and day out with the artist, just I could probably go on and on. In terms of my responsibilities there are a few notable mistakes in there. A couple of those, and on kind of a quirky, fun story, I had to pack up all Lino's artwork to ship around the world. So, like he'd spend an hour or two, whatever, blowing something for a demonstration, and it was my job to take it out of the annealer and put it in a packing box so it would arrive safely at some gallery to sell for $60,000 or $100,000 or whatever it was going for. Yeah. So to say that I had a certain amount of awe and anxiety is an understatement. But it was also cool because I was dealing with my idol, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what brought you to the Priory, and did you teach somewhere else before this, or was this your first teaching experience?
Nah, after I left Corning, I moved to New Orleans and was working at a glass shop there. It's the job that I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. And I was there for a while, and then I moved back to Massachusetts, and I started working with a few shops around Newport and Boston. And at the time, I was needing some stability, and it seemed like taking the lessons and experiences I had with teaching glass workshops seemed like a good way to go. And that put me into teaching high school art. So then I was initially hired in teaching high school art for graphic design, and glass wasn't at all a part of it. But I did everything else for a long time. And then again, life took its twists and turns, and I ended up out here in California for a good long while, basically starting an art program from kind of like 2 classes and built it up. And when it was time to be done there, I was found by Priory and interviewed and took the job. So that's how I'm here.
And did you start out with glass from the get-go at Priory?
See, how did it go? No, my first year I did not do glass. It was a strange time because Ms. Sullivan was on maternity leave. In my first year, I went on paternity leave. So there's a few things that were kind of like swirling around there. But the second year that I was here, I started with glass, and I've been doing it since.
Nice. So when I was taking the classes at Half Moon Bay Art Glass, one of the instructors, she wasn't like the head instructor, but she talked to me about how sometimes the work here is kind of repetitive, and that she doesn't always feel like she's being able to it's not a creative outlet anymore because she's just doing the same thing over and over
again. The work here in her job.
At her job.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel this way when you're teaching, or how do you integrate your own creativity into teaching?
So there's probably, I'm going to read into her experience a little bit.
Yeah.
Just because I have been there, and it's common.
Yeah.
Which is to say that glass blowers really at their core are skilled labor. In Murano, even though the glass blowers there are counted as valuable as royalty, they're very, very well regarded, they're still skilled labor when it comes to it. And that means doing a lot of things that you may not like doing because somebody else needs it and they're going to pay you.
Mm-hmm.
It also means doing some things a lot over and over and over again. Like somebody gets famous for their wine glass and they make a lot of that wine glass because it's paying bills, and it's economically viable to have that kind of assembly.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of production work is very, very common for glass artists because, well, it pays the bills. And it gets, exposure and that kind of thing. So in my early jobs as a glass blower, my first one was in production doing paperweights. Like I was in a team of, I can't remember, 6 or 7 guys, and I was number 4 in the steps that they were made to make the paperweight.
So it was like
it was an assembly line.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so every day for like how many hours I was there, I was poking holes in the end of the glass and doing a gather to put bubbles in it. That was my step.
Oh, okay.
And periodically we would do a different paperweight, and my step would be a little different. But that's basically what I did.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing is true for most glass artists. And so it can be very repetitive. The other aspect of it being repetitive is that unlike kiln forming, glass blowing especially requires repetitive practice. Yeah, like yourself, you have to do the same motion over and over again to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
Some fields of study say after 10,000 hours you'll have mastery of your thing. I don't know what it is for glass. I think it's a lot more than that. At the early stages, I've told you, and as I was told, people told me, make 100 of them, and then we can talk about getting better.
Yeah.
So, like that kind of repetition and time dedication, it's straining. It is, and it requires somebody to make the choice to be dedicated to it. So there's that. The other end of it is what she was saying, which is you got to put your own stuff into it sometime to keep your own energy going, and to also expand. So somewhere in those bipolar extremes, you find your balance and what works. Sometimes I'll just for a couple weeks makes the same thing because my head and my body are at a place where that kind of sequential repetition is really needed. And then things start breaking, and I realize, okay, I've got to do something else for a while, and I just start making stuff, whether or not it survives, and then I can try this thing and try that thing, and I can make mistakes and come up with something new and fun. Mm-hmm. And the hope that all glass artists anyway have is that the things that they do for fun are the things that everybody wants to buy. Mm-hmm. So that you can just make your own stuff, and create as you need to, and that will pay the bills. That's the dream.
I guess teaching must be kind of a nice balance of that, though, because you do get to kind of create the course and put in your own ideas and... Yeah.
There is that. There's a little bit more freedom in kiln forming to do that because the techniques are more accessible and there's a quicker success rate.
Yeah.
Certain aspects of flame working have that, others don't. And so every year I do experiment with how to best take all of this practice and repetition and skill building and have fun creativity to create an experience where people are having a good time.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get it right for the student, and sometimes I look back on it and say, next time I'll do that different. But it keeps me always learning, keeps me always growing, and it keeps me in the fundamentals, which is really, really important. I get to remember, I have to remember to hold my hand this way or move this way because the glass is going to do that. Sure. I have to remind people of those things all the time. Mm-hmm. But I also have to remember not to give somebody who's been doing it for 2 weeks 10 years of information because they're not ready for it. So, and that way it's really great. The frustrating part about teaching is that I spend the majority of my time helping other people improve what they're doing and spend time doing what they're doing, and I don't get to do it a ton myself.
That's true. Yeah. So,
I don't know, does that really, like, I give you a very long answer to a short question.
Yeah, no. That's totally what I was looking for. Yeah.
All right.
So in general, what have been like the most rewarding parts about being an artist, and what have been the aspects of it that you most struggled with?
Well, let's see, the struggle part, I do find hustling on the gallery circuit very difficult. That kind of marketing, rah, put myself out there all the time. I find hard. Some people really love it. I am always trying to get better at it. So early in my career, that was a big stressor for me. The great parts about being an artist for me is that my brain is always making something, and my body is generally pretty good at translating that into something physical. So it's very rewarding for me personally, like if I'm sitting on an airplane and I got nothing to do for 4 hours, chances are I'm going to spend the entire time thinking about how to make something. So whether it's the craft of building a dulcimer or the artistry in making a sculpture, whatever it is, my energies naturally go for that. So I find it very personally rewarding for that reason. And then the things that I create that people enjoy and kind of get lost in for a little while, that's where it's more rewarding. So if I make a set of wine glasses or something for someone who takes it and they use it at their wedding, that's very rewarding for me because it becomes part of their ceremony and their ritual, their relationship. Those are the kind of objects that I like making the most. It's one reason why I like making dulcimers. Like, I'm not a musician.
Yeah.
I've tried. I'm not a musician. I would love to be, but I'm not. But I enjoyed making that object because, someone who can play it creates this experience for other people. And that I find really, really, really fascinating. So, yeah, that's where I'm at now, I guess.
Nice. Anything else you want to talk about, like your transition as an artist, like going from a student to, times in the workplace to teaching, like for other artists out there, aspiring artists, like what to look out for, what to just kind of like push through, like.
Man, that's okay. See, I could write a book on that question. But for whatever reason, the thing that comes to mind right now that's probably a little bit more tangible or applicable is that people just be transparent and honest with themselves. Like being able to pause and reflect, to honestly figure out and articulate where a person is in that moment of time and how they fit into their experiences is really something that's valuable for them into solidifying their own inner strength, their identity, and it reveals how capable somebody is in whatever it is they're doing that will allow them to increase that thing, to get better at it. But yeah, it's a practice to pause and reflect in that way, to listen to oneself, to be honest about it, and to be generous with whatever you discover there. And then to move forward in a way that's true and authentic and meaningful. So, and again, that can be applied to lots of things, but it's something that I think about as an art teacher somehow most days.
Good way to end it. Thank you.
All right, cool.